And what does that tell them about our reliability? Are we an ally, or are we intent on implementing Henry Kissinger's famous remark that to be an enemy of the United States is a problem, but to be a friend could be lethal, fatal?
And, honestly, I think that the Israelis basically committed or created a Frankenstein monster, because I think they were gleefully happy when President Trump fell for all the nonsense that Netanyahu told him in the first year or whatever of his second term here, and got him to go ahead and go into the war, first in the Operation Midnight Hammer, and then now in this one. And now all of a sudden, okay, well, we got there, they haven't gotten it over the line yet, but they have this section, I think 219, and I forget the other one, where they're going to tie the U.S. military and intelligence. I think now, tell me what you think, I think now the Israelis are going, let's just survive Donald Trump, and then we'll get back to business as usual, but we'll have more hooks in the meat.
Bezalel Smotrich just said. He said, well, we don't want any part of this war. Let the Americans and the Iranians fight. We're going to, continuing doing what we're doing, which is trying to annex southern Lebanon and parts of Syria and evict all the Palestinians from the West Bank and squeeze the Palestinians in Gaza down into a prison complex called a humanitarian city. That's what they call it. And no, I think everybody's just counting the days and hoping that some consistency will be restored by the midterm elections, but we don't know what's going to happen in those elections. And so,
we got to get to them first. If I can just be blunt here, this is the mentality of the guy who's calling the shots. We just shown you specifically some of the statements that he's made and the deals that he's undone, et cetera. Like, that probably is enough by itself. But here's how I think, Ambassador, I think this is what he actually thinks. I no longer just reflexively say he's just saying this because he wants to spread a narrative. I'm starting to believe he believes stuff like this.
We're doing very well against the Islamic Republic of Iran. We're doing extremely well. They would like to do something, but I say they're not ready yet. They need more of the same. They're not ready yet. They got some evil intentions. We cannot let them have a nuclear weapon.
He says they're not ready yet for negotiations, so we need to keep hitting them more. How do you react to that?
Well, I think the nuclear weapon is not the issue now. The issue is the Strait of Hormuz, the health of the American and the global economy. As for the nuclear weapon, we just wiped out everybody in the Iranian leadership who was against it. And I think we have made the Iranian development of a nuclear weapon inevitable. They agreed not to do it for 60 days under the so-called Memorandum of Understanding, which it should have been called the Memorandum of Misunderstanding. But we never honored any of that. That memorandum said no threats of use of force, no uses of force. We immediately broke that in both cases. It said we had to get the Israelis out of Lebanon. We made no effort to do that. In fact, we turned around, and Marco Rubio went and negotiated an agreement with the powerless government of Lebanon, a ceasefire with Israel. Well, it wasn't fighting Israel. There's the famous question which people ask about the French. How many Frenchmen does it take to defend Paris? And the answer is nobody knows. They've never tried. Well, in the case of Lebanon, how many Lebanese army people does it take to defend Lebanon? Nobody knows. They've never tried. The people who are fighting for Lebanon are Hezbollah. And we just did an agreement brokered an agreement between the Lebanese government and Israel that they will jointly go after Hezbollah. So what is this? It is, at a minimum, not very smart.
And at a maximum, it's very, very damaging. Here's what's going to compound the situation here. It's not just President Trump. And if it was just him, then there might be some light at the end of the tunnel. But unfortunately, he has a lot of enablers. Let me just show you a couple of them here. This is Jack Keane trying to say, hey, let's just finish the job, man.
Started the operation February 28th. They shut the straits down on March the 2nd. And after living with that for a month, prices started to move up the spiral. for certainly. There's huge economic and political implications of all of it. The president and his team felt the Iranians were sincere about willingness to negotiate, and we began a series of negotiations that lasted over 90 days, and even came up with a signed agreement referred to as the Memorandum of Understanding, which had only one agreement in it. Everything else was a promise for the future after 60 or so days of negotiation. The one agreement was Iran would open up the Straits of Hormuz and remove all their interference and restrictions. The United States would remove its blockade. We removed the blockade. Several days later, the Iranians began to interfere with the Straits of Hormuz.
So that's a pretty creative interpretation of things.
Exactly.
I'm pretty sure there were 14 points in there, and I think there wasn't just one for the United States. What do you think of it?
I think that's a complete distortion to the extent there was any agreement at all. Basically, the Memorandum of Understanding, as is the usual case, was not an agreement about anything except a statement of intent to continue a negotiation. And during that period of negotiation, Iran was to manage the shipping in the Strait of Hormuz without imposing tolls or fees. They didn't do that. We then began to try to insert ourselves into the situation. And Donald Trump actually eventually said, oh, well, we will run the Strait of Hormuz and we'll charge everybody 20% of the value of the cargo. Well, faced with that choice, everybody would opt for Iran, which was proposing a very modest fee structure. I think we have a problem with people like General Keane, others sycophants around the president. I don't even know whether he's aware of whether the military have had the courage to speak to him directly about the huge damage we're doing to our ability to respond to contingencies around the world. Everybody for years has said we should pivot to Asia, regarding China as the principal challenge to our global position. And we should reduce our presence in West Asia, the Middle East. We're doing the opposite. We're absolute opposite. Not only are we doing the opposite, but we're ensuring that if there is a Taiwan contingency, we will not be able to respond effectively to it. And we don't have any weapons to transfer to Ukraine through this mechanism of getting the Europeans to do that for us, so we can claim we're not involved somehow. I mean, we put, as a country, when we sell a weapon to somebody, we put restrictions on it. You can't retransfer that without our permission. So we are basically at war with the Russians, and they think so. And they know that the European Union and NATO European members are actively at war with them. And they know that Ukraine is striking deep into their territory with weapons, which in some cases were purposely designed by Western Europeans to accomplish that. I think the British in particular have designed a couple of long-range weapon systems for Ukraine. And we're somehow imagining that the Russians won't eventually be driven into a reprisal of some sort or a counterattack. You don't have to fire a missile at something to destroy it. There is such things as sabotage. There are fifth columns. There are special forces. I remember very well during my time as ambassador to Saudi Arabia, when we were both in the theater, that we were very concerned about Saddam Hussein bringing a biological weapon, anthrax, into Saudi Arabia. There was actually an intelligence report that 2 Iraqi jets carrying anthrax were intercepted over the Persian Gulf and shot down. But then it occurred to me, hey, you don't need a jet to deliver anthrax. You can use a camel. You can use a suitcase. You don't need to go high tech. So I think that we're really playing with an expansion of the war in Europe that could be very, very destructive and dangerous before we even get to the point that there's a lot of loose talk about nuclear weapons in various contexts, tactical nuclear weapons to use against China, nuclear weapons of some sort by the Russians to be used against whoever in Western Europe or Ukraine. This is all getting out of control. We've lost our minds. And the reason for that, I think, is that we have a president, we have a leadership in this country that no longer knows what it's doing and is frankly out of its mind in terms of its calculations. You keep hitting somebody, I suppose there may be one or two people in a schoolyard, if you hit them enough, they're cowardly and they run away. But for the most part, you hit people, they get angry and they hit back. And that is exactly the dynamic that we have set up all over the place. And the mafia-style protection racket that we're trying to run doesn't work.
And let me ask you a question. Since you used to be a senior official in both the Pentagon and in the State Department, you've kind of got, both sides of this view of physical experience in this. It's if we're just talking about President Trump and he's losing his cognitive ability, as I said a second ago, that's alarming. But how can you account for something like what I'm about to show you here when someone who was a former three-star general, a former division commander for the 82nd Airborne, no doubt, no less, and was also the vice president's national security advisor in the first Trump term, saying stuff like General Kellogg does here?
He wrote a great book a few years ago called Art of the Deal. One of the things he mentioned when you get to negotiations, you get to peace, is the use of leverage. And how do we get leverage over them right now? It is a theocratic regime. They have caused the deaths to Americans. That's the reason I've said you got to take something like Karg Island, which is 90% of their economy, or Larak Island, which is a command and control in the Strait of Hormuz as well. It's not because I think it's great to go and get into a fight, because I've been there and I know what it means. But the fact is I want to give the president leverage. So you get to a point where you're going to break their back, not only militarily, which we have done, and the senator was right about that, but basically break their back economically as well. And then you can help the Iranian people rise up. We're not going to invade Iran. We shouldn't invade Iran. We should probably help them when they arise.
Back again to this whole thing that the Iranian people are going to rise up. I don't know how that came back in, but holy cow, we're going to take Karg Island. I mean, has he even looked at a map? I mean, if he was a second lieutenant, I would say, man, you got some serious problems here. But I mean, how does he think that's going to affect leverage in negotiations when he's talking about something that militarily would be suicidal for our side?
Well, I remember Foreign Minister Araghchi of Iran saying, y'all come, we're waiting for you. This would be a bloodbath. If you look at where Karg Island is, which is way up the Persian Gulf and off the coast of Kuwait and Iran, anybody who goes there and occupies that is a sitting duck, even if you can get there. I suppose 82nd Airborne, you do an airdrop on Karg Island. I bet that would be fun. Anyway, I wonder, that strikes me as utter military incompetence, plus a ridiculous interpretation of who has leverage. Yeah, there you are. I mean, look at that. Iran is to the right, the big landmass there. You're out in the middle of nowhere. So this is militarily illiterate, but it's also a complete misunderstanding of the situation. We have destroyed Iran's military. Well, then how the hell are they using the 1,000 miles of coastline they have with the Persian Gulf to control the shipping? What is it that we think we've done? We have
here's our bases that have been hit apparently by this destroyed military.
Well, exactly, and they're still being hit. And it appears that while we're running out of ammo and interception capability, the Iranians have not begun to do so. They have retained a great deal of their original arsenal. They're also manufacturing underground. And so we're depleting our weapons, and they are arguably holding steady, even as they're retaliating against us. And I think waiting for us to concentrate in Israel and then launch a knockout blow. They're not stupid. I don't think General Kellogg would have made it above the sergeant level in the Iranian army.